Hello again, everybody. You are watching the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. This is the next video, or the second video, in terms of how are we going to service, overhaul, inspect a direct drive motor from one of the Singer Slant-O-Matic series. This is, of course, this motor came out of the Singer 301A, the forlorn black version of this machine that I bought on an auction, and I'm going to attempt to restore. This machine needs a lot more than some of them. That doesn't mean it's not restorable. In fact, if I were to clean and oil it, it might even sew stitches. But in for a penny, in for a pound, we're gonna go through the whole machine, which is the whole point of this. Now, there are different things to look at when you're, if you're holding this motor in your hands for the first time. You want to look around. Well, what do you see? The first thing you'll notice is there are two screws on opposite sides of the motor here. Now, these screws are designed to come out, and then we're going to remove these nice little plastic caps. It'll make more sense when we take them off. And behind those are the brushes, the motor brushes. And of course, we need to be able to inspect them, potentially replace them if we need to. What else do we have? On the other side of the motor, we have bolts. There's a bolt here and a bolt over here. And there's also, assuming that this motor's never been taken apart, I don't have any reason to think it has been, one of the things we want to look at is there is a piece, a little metal piece that sits in, you cannot see it right now, but it has a purpose. And you want to make sure that you do not lose that metal piece because it sits there and it's easy for it to fall out. You don't even see it. You're like, what is that? And then you have to figure out how to put it all back together. When you put something back together, you don't want pieces left over, because if you have that, something's not right. Okay, let's start over here with the side. Now, I have, of course, my fancier screwdriver bits, but because of this tool, I don't want the end of this tool to cause any damage. Remember, this is a 75-year-old Bakelite. Bakelite's great, but it's a rigid, hard plastic, so we want to be kind to it. Now I'm going to take a smaller screwdriver and see if these screws or bolts will move for me, or whether they will protest. You never know. Wow, well, that one's in there good, and it's been in there a while. Let's see here. I may get myself a larger screwdriver. All right, let's see if my larger screwdriver gives me a little more torque here. All right, I just heard the screw release. Again, if it fights you, if you try and the screw doesn't move, do not try to force it. You can damage it. Make sure your screwdriver's off and seated. There we go. And you'll know when the screw's moving, and if it is, you should be fine. But don't. If you get in a tug of war with a screw, and you apply too much pressure, you can end up causing yourself more problems than you bargained for. Now I can go back with my smaller screwdriver. I can see a little bit better, and I'll get these screws out. Again, you're going to have a number of screws here. If you're not sure which is which, just take a little piece of tape, painter's tape or something, and mark them. Say, oh, these are the motor brush cap screws. I've done enough of these, I should be able to remember. Now, what you're seeing, again, I think I mentioned this to you all, you have, let's get our angle back where we can see what we're doing. This, of course, is a cap. And when I pull it up, you can see this beautiful, look at all that brass. There's oil there, which tells me somebody might have squirted oil there because they thought they were being smart, and they weren't. We don't need oil here. I don't think they ruined anything necessarily, but clearly somebody thought that who knows, maybe it just, I don't know how it got there. But the first thing I want to do is maybe mop some of it up with a cotton swab. just to get it out of our way. We don't need oil here, and brass is very forgiving unless there's corrosion that's gotten in there. Usually brass is a very good when you're dealing with screws and holes here. So right now, and there's a little oil there on this side, but I'm just going to set that aside. I'll get that cleaned up before we're done. In fact, I'll just leave the screw right in the cap. Now, typically, when motor brushes wear, they typically wear the same. There are two, one on each side. It would be very unusual for one brush to wear more than another. Sometimes you can look to see how much brush you have left. Now, notice the spring, there's a spring on top of the brush, and the top of the spring will be here, okay? And then the top of the brush, usually when the brush is new, it's somewhere here. And then as the brush wears, the spring keeps pushing it down to keep it in contact. And eventually, when your brushes get too low, you may not have as much pressure, and it might be time to change them. Now, when I'm looking at this, I see some kind of goo in there. I don't even know what that is. I'll have to investigate that. We can see the copper, the commutator, that copper ring. Now what I'm looking at, it looks like this machine definitely got some use. And if I remember what I covered when I showed this machine to you all, there's paint wear on the front. This machine, whoever owned this machine, and there may have been more than one owner, they really like to sew, and they did. That doesn't mean that it's worn out. It just means it's got wear, clearly. So the question is, I can tell, and it may not show up on the camera, but I can tell that the spring goes all the way down to about here. And what that tells me is I've got maybe, oh gosh, I probably have about 1/4 of an inch, a little bit more of brush left. Now the brushes will still work, but it might be time for a brush replacement, okay? We're not doing that in this video, but we're just assessing, what's going on with this thing. Because until you open up a machine, you never really know. And I've told you all in the past that just because this machine, if it was beautiful, the paint was perfect, my first thought would be, well, maybe it wasn't used very much, but we don't know for sure. Now this, some kind of black goo, that looks like some kind of grease. Why that's there, I'm not sure. Or it actually just could be built up carbon. It just literally could be carbon. You can see the black that I'm getting when I go in here. More goo than I'm used to seeing on a motor. But again, I don't know if I touch it, is it just carbon? It feels oily, but again, the carbon could have, carbon is powder and it could have absorbed oil at some point. Hard to say. But again, I normally do not see this. But again, the whole purpose of doing this is we're trying to assess, is this motor going to be fine? Maybe it will. And of course, what you just heard is the other brush cap that I had loosened but not taken off. It fell, okay, and it did not hit my little pad here. But there it is, and it's fine. Again, we want to set that aside. These pieces will all come back when we're done with this project. So now let's go to the other side. Let's see. Yeah, and both brushes are worn the same. I'm trying to remember which side was which one I was looking at first. Anyway, both sides are worn the same. I think I have about 1/4 of an inch of brush left. Okay, but that's not our most immediate concern. We're just kind of checking things out. What's going on? What looks like what? If you have not gotten yourself cotton swabs, you are going to need them. So get yourself a big box. I go through quite a few of them. Now, again, I'm sure, I have a feeling someone might have squirted oil thinking, oh, let's put some oil in there. Unless a manual tells you to put oil, don't do that. Do not experiment with your machine. Do not see if you can figure out, without ever having done so, what needs to be oiled and what doesn't. Because if you do that, you're going to create a mess that you do not want to have to clean up. And your machine was designed, or excuse me, your motor was designed to only have lubrication in very specific points, not just because you thought that might be useful. More is not better. And when it comes to something like a sewing machine motor or any motor, I would suggest using a great deal of caution if you think you need to lubricate. There are places in a motor that need lubrication, but they are not part of your normal oiling. That's not something you would do. I'm going to turn the shaft here to see if I can get any more of this commutator, which seems to be covered in some black goo. Cleaning a commutator is not unusual. What is unusual is the oily nature of this. So again, not really sure who had it, what they did with it. Oh well. And I'm just turning the worm gear so I can start taking. I haven't really taken this motor apart yet, so when you're doing this, you may get distracted like I just did. So back to what I was discussing before, trying to get the motor apart. Okay, so we've taken our brush. We're not going to take our brush housings, these beautiful brass housings. We're not taking those out yet because we're not ready to do that. But what we do want to do is now look at these bolts on the other side. These bolts are designed to come out because this motor is basically, you're going to see the black Bakelite section. It's like a clamshell, right? And then you see this piece here, which I believe is, I haven't used a magnet on it. I don't know if it's steel or aluminum. I'd have to check. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to turn. That bolt, by the way, I didn't have to work hard on it. It kind of just started moving. It kind of surprised me that it was loose. This one did too. I mean, they're not super loose, but interesting. Now, you can see there's already some play going on here, right? Now, if you look, and I'm going to have to base on my memory because it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that these brass threaded holes for the bolts that hold the brush caps, I believe are connected somewhere, somehow to these bolts, but we're going to find out. I'm having to refresh my memory on specifically what was connected to what. You can see the bolt moving, which is kind of interesting. In fact, I turned it out and one of the big bolts fell right out. So we'll set that aside. We'll get the other one out. Notice I'm holding everything together. Don't just pull the bolt out and let it all fall all over the place. Let's see if we can get the bolts out. Now, let me show you this. My memory did serve me right this time. Remember the bolt? When I push it back in, notice it's pushing out on this beautiful brass housing. So there is a connection there, okay? So I want to hold on to see if I can keep that brass housing still, and then I'll turn my bolt to get it to come on out. And it is now out. Now, I want to draw your attention to the fact that there are two pieces here that I'm going to pull apart. Now, I'm going to test my memory again. It's maybe been a few years since I took one of these apart. I've serviced them, but taking it all apart is something. Now, notice, I believe it's on this top side, okay? When I start to pull this apart, you're going to see a couple of pieces you want to pay attention to. You see this piece right here. This looks like a little piece of cardboard. It's actually an insulator that you do not want to lose. You need that, okay? Now, as I do this, as I pull this out, I'm looking for that piece. There's a piece. I'm trying to see if it's here. It actually may be further inside of here. But do you see this little piece that I just pushed up? that is it's separating the metal of here, which join, when these two pieces join together, there of course are, these are the ports, the brass connections where our power connects. So you do not want to lose this. I don't know if this is made of mica, I'm not sure, but and of course I see a little glisten there, so I want to take my cotton swab, right? Make sure that I mop anything. I really don't want oil at all. It is not, you know, don't be surprised if you have a motor and you start to see little shiny spots of oil. Now, if we come behind here, you can now see the other side. You say, well, what's behind there? Well, there's the other side of the connection, right? You see them. And now I want to kind of look in here and see if there's anything that everything seems to look just fine in terms of what I expected to see. Okay, so what do we want to do? Do not break this piece. We want to actually just leave it be. Leave it where it is unless the machine requires us to remove it. Now, let's see. What else are we missing here or lacking? Now, take a look. There's another way to verify how long your brushes are. Those brushes, I have not removed the brush holders, but if you look, you will see, okay, I got a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch, right? I think I've got, oh, maybe 3/8 or something like that. I don't know. Now, I'm also seeing a little bit of oiliness here. So all of this, these are going to be, the brushes heads, the brush holders are going to be removed. I'm going to take all of this out and I'll assess whether I want to replace the brushes. I might. However, what I do want you to see, just looking here, trying to assess if there's anything more I want to address while we're in this section of the motor. Again, I haven't cleaned anything yet. I'm simply looking at it. Now, this piece came off in my hand. Let's remember where that goes. Remember, it goes in a certain way. Be gentle with it. It's 75 years old. Don't be rough with that. And we're just looking down into the motor. I see, you know, black soot. And again, if a machine has been used a lot, you're going to get that carbon black buildup. That's not shocking or surprising. And then there's tension here because remember, oh, there's my little brass shafts. Remember, if you look, we have wired connections up here, okay? So those are our wires. And the brass connectors for our motor power are sitting here. You want to be very gentle with this because these are likely, I believe they're soldered, although I think I see a little screw here. So don't be rough with these. Okay, so we're going to leave those in place. But when I get around to taking out the brushes, I'm going to have full access down here to the bottom, and at that time you're going to see, it's kind of hard to see much of anything at the moment, but you will see, trying to determine what you are able to see on the camera here. Right now it looks like a dark tunnel for most of you. Let's see. All right. Down in here, once these brushes are out of the way, you will see the bushing that the end, the shaft of the motor, basically sits down in. You can see some really old grease there. Okay, So basically, we're going to leave this portion of the motor. I don't need to pull all of this out because this is basically the Bakelite shell. I can access my brushes from here, and again, the wiring of the motor connects from connects basically from the power and then to the brushes, and it is actually down in here. Now, one thing I notice is, just looking here, my wires inside, there's some insulation, and then I can also see wires, period, and I'm looking, trying to ascertain if, make sure I'm getting some kind of view here for you all. If those wires are in good shape and part of the insulation is not there, and that's because of where they connect, or did the insulation come off? I don't believe so, but I'll be looking at that to ascertain. And of course, all of this needs to be cleaned up because we've got, combination. It looks like we've got some grease and we've got some carbon dust, and I really want all of this to be very clean when I go to test the motor. That's why I didn't plug it in and try to test it right away. That was not the goal. But again, as far as our wire connections here, these here look okay. And the grease port, I've done videos before. We can, again, there's a way to remove that and replace the felt. So when I set this over here for just a moment, and again, these are fine. We don't have to worry about these. We know where these are going to go. Let's go back to this section of the motor. Okay, so you have, you can see as the motor is designed to spin, and I'm curious as to whether this motor has been opened before. And I asked myself that question because there is a piece which I do not see here. It's a little sort of a shaped like a little speed bump, and it's a piece of steel, and it normally fits right in here in that slot. Let me point to it and get my finger out of the way. It goes here, and then it also fits here. Okay, up in that very top top of that arch, and I don't see it. Now, when I did my first one of these, that piece was there and it fell out, and all I saw was, I had never seen one of these motors and didn't know where it went. I had to go online and research to find out where it was supposed to go. And I have a feeling that this motor may have been opened before. Don't know for sure, but I don't know. It tells me that, it didn't leave the factory this way. Now the motor commutator, which is this piece here, has a lot of black on it, and it looks like it's got more use than some. There's still a lot of life left in it. And of course there's the little fan that helps pull air to cool it while it's turning. And again, basically up here on this top area here, this is where you've seen me all in the past. You've seen me put usually 1 or 2 drops of SAE 30 weight oil. That oil is thin enough to lubricate a bearing. It's actually, the bearings were originally packed with grease, but without taking the bearing out, you normally don't have to do that, but you can put 1 or 2 drops of that SAE 30 oil, and that is thick enough that when the motor gets hot, it doesn't run everywhere. However, it's thin enough to basically rejuvenate the old grease in the bearings, and usually it's fine. However, I'm still curious about that piece and why I don't see it here. This, again, I'm pretty sure someone has opened the motor up. So essentially what you've seen me do is disassemble the motor, and these are the parts I normally would disassemble so that, of course, I can go in and start cleaning the commutator. Also remember that anytime you take anything off, sometimes when you're dealing with a motor, you will see you will see shims, little rings that are designed to keep a certain distance. If you have those in your motor, do not lose them. Be watching for them. They look like little rings, and you need those. They're spacers. So be sure, you know, I may have one stuck down here in the bottom. Well, I can't really see right now. And I don't see one here specifically. But anyway, this is basically the disassembling of this Slant-O-Matic motor. As of now, I cannot tell you if this motor is any good. I haven't wired it up, and this is a good reason why you would not want to just turn on a motor. Oh, let's see if it runs. We need to look at it. We need to inspect it, make sure it's still going to run. And I may have to go online and order that little piece that I know is missing. Because there's a reason. Singer didn't put it there just for kicks, right? They did it because it was designed to go there. Now, could it have fallen down in here somewhere? Maybe. Maybe it's stuck. Maybe it's waiting for me to find it, but I don't know. It normally would plop right out, right? It would fall out if it were in here. And that tells me that somebody's come in and maybe taken it apart before and didn't know what it was and didn't put it back. It's entirely possible. Anyway, filthy dirty motor, and unusually so for one of these. I hope this was helpful watching me take this apart, and I will continue to make efforts to see if I can figure out if once I get all the parts, we'll put it back together, it'll be cleaned, and we'll take a look at those brushes once they're cleaned to see if we need to replace those. And then at that point I will be putting the motor back in and not trying to get the machine to sew, because the machine is, you know, is a filthy wreck, but I can disengage the my clutch, you know, as if I were going to wind a bob, and so I don't need the needle or any of that mechanism to move, and I'll simply see what the motor sounds like after I get it back in. But we're nowhere near there right now. But one of you had followed up with me, it must have been months ago, hey, are you ever going to do that video on a Slant-O-Matic motor? And hey, how about that? I'm doing the video, and don't you know I would get one of the filthiest ones I've ever seen with a missing part. So stay tuned, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I will keep you updated on the saga of this motor. This machine, unlike my first 301, which was almost never used at all, it was like getting a little time capsule, this machine has been used a lot. But it is a 301, it is black, it has the extension, and it still, I believe, is, when I'm done, fingers crossed, it will make a fantastic sewing machine because of how they were built. And if I test this motor, after going through all of this and messing around with it, if it does not function properly, I can get a replacement, and that's really awesome. I just have to be careful to make sure I get one that was specified for the 301 should there be any changes or differences that Singer may or may not have made. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and stay tuned for the next installment of this motor series.